stumbles not, because he sees the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbles because there is no light in him. Just for a thought today, what time is it in your life? What time is it in your life? This was in the life of Mary and Martha. This is that which the 11th chapter of John is talking about, this family who Jesus had befriended, and they had befriended Jesus. And they were individuals that had a special relationship with God. And in having that special relationship with God, there are times when we have special relationships and we feel that it should give us special privileges. And in those special privileges, we feel that things should happen simply because we are who we are, and things should happen because of us. And I want you to understand that in the kingdom of God, it lets us know that there are no big I's and no little U's. But I want you to understand that God responds to us based on who we are and our relationship with him as well. We find in the 17th chapter of John where Jesus said, I'm praying for my own, and I'm not praying for the world. It was a time when Jesus was praying, and this was his final prayer about his disciples and about his followers, whereby God would protect them and not take them out of the world, but strengthen them in the world, whereby they could be overcomers. God wants us to be overcomers in this world. He wants us to be strong enough to stand, having put on the whole armor as he had recommended for us to put on in Ephesians, and then he tells us to just stand. There are times when things happen in our life where God gets our attention. I want you to understand that there are times when things happen to us because God is causing us to refocus on him. It is possible for those individuals who love the Lord and has heard his cry to wonder or lose focus from time to time, or have expectations to get ahead of where God is going to get the results of what they think they need before God delivers. And so this was one of the times when Jesus is away from his main body of individuals that followed him, and he was with his disciples, this small group of individuals that were with him. And these particular individuals were, at one point earlier, they had been run out of Judea, and they've been run out as witnesses of the truth that Jesus was preaching and teaching. In fact, they wanted to stone Jesus back there where he had come from. Mary and Martha were friends of his, and Lazarus. And there was a report that came to Jesus that Lazarus, their brother, was sick. The thing that I want you to understand is that sickness is one of the things that happens in our lives, in our world, that will get our attention. Sickness will cause you, for even those individuals who don't pray, say that there is no God, to start looking to a more powerful source for help in time of trouble and in time of need. Sickness is something that is not always in our control as to how it happened or that it happens to us. So sometimes we find ourselves getting sick because of something that we ate or how much we ate. So sometimes we find ourselves getting sick because of what we've drank or how much we have had to drink. So sometimes we get sick because of what we've taken in form of even medicine or how much of it that we've taken. And then there are other times when you go to bed one way and you wake up a totally different way. I don't know whether I have any witnesses in here that there are some times that you went to sleep one way and you woke up a totally different way. And then there are times when you felt good this morning. And before the night, you have your feelings or your mood or that's what's going on with you has changed. Sometimes it's things that happen to us that causes us to stop in our tracks, to stop doing what we're doing and take notice of what's happening to us. I had a friend when I was young, and this friend of mine, his name was Dwight, and Dwight was one that he didn't have any brothers and sisters. He was just him and his mom and his dad. And in our small community, most of us were poverty people, in poverty. We didn't have a whole lot. In fact, at our high school, I can remember that only a couple of people didn't get free lunch. And don't look at me strange. And your high school was perhaps the same. You probably didn't know all the people, but only 2 people or 3 didn't get free lunch. And so Dwight was one that he didn't have any brothers and sisters. And I can remember during the Christmas holidays, he was telling me that he was going to get a big wheel racing set. A big wheel racing set. That was a big deal back in those days. Because I want you to understand that most of the time you just got some cap pistols and a mask and a cowboy hat. I'm just being real. But Dwight, he got a big wheel racing set. And I can remember how when Dwight was excited because his mom and dad was going to get him that big wheel racing set. And so the Christmas morning, I was just as excited as Dwight was. Because him being my friend, and guess what? I knew that in order for him to have a good time, he needed to have somebody to race against. And so therefore, that Christmas morning, I couldn't wait for my dad to take me by Dwight's house. And so here it is, Dwight and I, we're there trying to figure out this great big track in which these little bitty racing cars race on. And they weren't self-powered. They had to go through this little tunnel that spin, and the tunnel would launch them out into the track. And they would speed up as they launched, and then they would slow down as they go through the hills and curves. And so Dwight and I playing with this big wheel racing set, what I learned was that it was a lot of work that was involved. It was a lot of work that was involved. The reason why there was a lot of work that was involved, because the cars didn't do it by themselves. They needed the help of Dwight and I. And because Dwight had caught on a little faster than I did, simply because it was his racing track, he was always faster than me. But what would happen in the race that we had, he always had to start it over because they never had enough energy to make it to the end. And I look at that as the way life is today. We have to keep going through the tunnel, and that particular tunnel would put pressure against the cars and then launch them out. And the cars would go onto that track, and sometimes because of the speed that it came onto the track, it would cause them to crash and run off the track. And so you had to slow down the little wheel that sent it through this little tunnel to make sure that it had just enough to stay on the track and to continue to race, but not enough that they would leave off the track. And so in the race of life, that's one of the things that we have to go through as well. We in a race of life. And as we go through the tunnel of trouble, David says, the valleys of the shadows of death. As we go through those things, we have to have God to launch us onto the track whereby we can continue to travel on this journey. And so therefore, a lot of us are afraid of going through stuff because if we go through some things, it causes us to go have pressure put upon us. But we don't realize that particular pressure is what takes us to get to where we're going. And so as we go through some things, we have to learn how to get better at going through it, and watch this, and not get so caught up on that we now have strength, that we, watch this, lose control, is that we understand that the strength in which we have comes from God. And so therefore, as we go through some things, we find out in our lives, it's only to make us strong. Because God wants to strengthen us. He wants us to be able to go through some things as we go over our heels and around our curves. He wants us to be able to make those turns, and he wants us to be able to go those hills while we can make it to the end of our race. So therefore, I used to run away from trouble. I used to run away from opposition. I used to didn't want to have any issues. But now I've learned that the more things that comes against me are coming against me to make me strong. And so what God is saying to me is, Sample, I want you to be stronger than you were yesterday. And the only way that you can be stronger than you were yesterday, you got to go through something today. And as you go through things today, it causes you to be strong enough to face tomorrow. And so what God is saying to us is, what time is it in your life? What time is it in your life? Are you traveling along life's journeys and you're thinking that everything is okay? Well, I want you to understand, you're either in it or you're getting ready to go through it, or you're just coming out of it. But you're going to always have some issues. Things going to always happen in our lives. I want you to understand that as things happen in our lives, God is getting our attention. Sometimes those things that happen in our lives, so sometimes it's death. Yeah, sometimes it's death. At 14 years old, I lost my father to a car accident. It got our attention. It made us know that people around you, and people around me, and people that are in my life weren't going to be there always. He got my attention. God do different things in our world, in our lives, that will get our attention, that will cause us to focus on him. And then we begin to understand that if it had not been for the Lord on my side, where would I be? Yeah, so sometimes death gets our attention. Yeah, in the midst of trouble, in the midst of pain, God is getting our attention. Sometimes tragedies gets our attention. Yeah, I want you to understand that 2020, March, the world was, the United States was shut down. God got our attention. There wasn't a person that was walking on this planet that was brave enough to think that he or she could defeat a disease. And the world was so afraid that even atheists started looking to the church. Folk that didn't even think there was a God started trying to find a source of power to be able to go through this. God does things to get our attention. Sometimes it's the loss of a job. Sometimes it's loss of the income that used to come in to our lives. In fact, there are those that's sitting here looking at me right now that you feel that if you didn't have a job tomorrow, that you wouldn't be able to make it through to next year. Well, I want you to understand something. Your job is not what's sustaining you. Somebody said, well, yeah, Pastor, I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm getting a stimulus check. And well, I want you to understand, watch this. You don't survive on what's monies and what's green as far as monies. You survive on everything that you get, everything that you have come from the strength of God. And so therefore, we have to understand that when tragedies come, those tragedies are also meant to make us strong. Sometimes the loss of a job or the loss of a position, a setback. We feel that those kind of things, and we know that those kind of things also get our attention. It causes us to look at things from a different perspective. All of us have learned how to survive off of a little bit. Yeah, I want you to understand, you've warehoused toilet paper, and you've warehoused tissue, and you've warehoused soap, and you've warehoused soup. You've warehoused different products and different products, and you warehouse them based on the fact, if I can't get any more of it, I have enough of it to take me a little bit farther. Why would you understand the warehousing of it is not what sustained you? There were people that died during this disease that had a warehouse full of it. There were people that didn't survive this tragedy that had their garages filled with food. There were individuals who did not survive this tragedy, had their garages filled with water, only not to be able to drink it. There were those who survived this tragedy because God is the one that gives us power and strength. So therefore, but it gets our attention. Every news channel talked about it. Every city had issues with it. And now with the numbers they're saying going down, only because people are being tested at home. Only because when people are tested at home, if 10 people get tested at home, I'm talking to you, America. If 10 people get tested at home and 3 call in and say that they're positive, and 7 was positive and never called in, then if you base your numbers based on the 3 that called in, naturally they're going to be low. Because you know what the world wants is low numbers. Because watch this, those individuals that are making decisions for you are making the decisions based on the fact that you continue to work, that you continue to operate, that you continue to spend, that you continue to go, that you continue to shop. And so they base their numbers low, whereby you can continue to do what you're doing. And the whole idea is that only the strong will survive. Tragedies gets our attention. The loss of material things has a way of getting our attention. I've had members and I've had friends and I've had family members who have lost cars and have lost houses. And I believe you me, it got their attention. People have a tendency to rush to the church and flock to the church when they lose stuff and things. I want you to understand that Mary and Martha was no different than the rest of us when it comes to the fact that we expect different things out of God based on the fact that we are in relationship with him. I've been paying my tithes. I've been coming to Sunday school. I sing in the choir. I usher on the board. I preach from the pulpit. And Lord, now I'm in an issue. Things are happening in my life. Sometimes those kind of things get our attention to God. And we focus on him based on the fact that we've lost a material thing. God always gets our attention when he wants to perform a miracle in our lives. And we don't always realize or give God the credit for the miracle that he's performing in our lives. But God always gets our attention. I want you to understand that when the children of Israel was at the Red Sea and the Egyptian was behind them and the mountains were around them and they had no place to go, God got their attention. When you get into a position where you feel like you have no way out, God got your attention. When your thoughts are one way and God's thoughts are another way and the world at large appears to be against you based on the fact of how you think, God getting your attention. And so here it is. I want you to understand as God gets your attention, not everything that we do or that we go through, we acknowledge it as being God. We don't always recognize or acknowledge God bringing us in or out of storms. There's no storm that you've been in that God didn't allow you to get in. That there's no storm that you ever came out of that God didn't pull you out of. There's no storm that's in your future that God had already prepared you to be able to travel through. There's nothing that's going to happen to you. There's nothing that you're going to hear or see that God had already prepared you to go through. God has made and equipped you to be able to go through that which he has created you to go through in your life. So you have to ask yourself, what time is it in my life. Mary and Martha was in a difficult time in their lives. And the reason why is because they had a friend named Jesus and had a brother named Lazarus, and Jesus wasn't there and Lazarus was sick. They sent for Jesus to come. And when Jesus got word that Lazarus was sick, well, Jesus let them know that this sickness is not unto death. He began to talk to his disciples, those who were around him and with him, and let them know that it's not unto death. And so therefore, the disciples were at ease, but they didn't understand that a miracle was being worked. Sometimes when we see clouds, there is no rain. Sometimes when we hear thunder, there is no storm. But then there are other times we see a small hand fist from a distance, and God is making some storm up in your life. And so what God was doing was God was preparing the people around Jerusalem. God was preparing the people there in Bethany. God was preparing Mary and Martha. God was preparing the disciples to go through a storm, good God Almighty, that they didn't create, but God was preparing for them to see a miracle in him. So Jesus let them know that Lazarus sleepeth. Somebody very intelligent made the remark that if he sleepeth, he does well. Yeah, and Jesus had to make it plain to them that Lazarus is dead. And so when he made it plain to them that Lazarus had died, then he told them, and I must go back to Bethany. And so when he began to say that, one of the ones in the crowd stepped from among them and said, didn't you remember back there they wanted to stone you, kill you while we were there, and us, and now you want to go back there and say, I want to understand. Jesus said, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sake I wasn't there. In other words, some things in life God is preparing us to go through, and it feels like he's not with us. Sometimes in our lives, God is preparing us to go through some storms, and it feels like we're going through the storms all by ourselves. Sometimes in our lives, things happen to us, and we feel like we don't have no way out. But God has already, as he prepared the storm, he prepared a way for you to get out. Woo! And I'm glad for your sake I wasn't there. See, the thing I want you to understand is, what Jesus was saying to the disciples was, had I been there, watch this, you would have thought when I woke Lazarus up that he was just out for a short period of time. But now here it's been, Lazarus has been dead a couple of days, and Jesus got to get back to where Lazarus is. That's going to take another couple of days. Now when he arrived there, y'all want to hear what I'm saying? By the time he arrives back in Bethany, the people that had recognized and seen Jesus before had already let Martha and Mary know that the Master Jesus is coming. There's always somebody that's going to run ahead of the crowd to let the rest of the crowd know that y'all hear what I'm saying, that the Lord Jesus is on his way. And so when Jesus made there where Mary and Martha was, what he found was Martha was already outside waiting on him to show up. See, sometimes we want to, y'all hear what I'm saying, we want to wait on God because we want him to show up in our lives. And then there are times when he shows up, it seems like he showed up too late. Y'all hear what I'm saying? And when he showed up, what Martha let him know was, Master, if you had been here, my brother had not died. If you had been here, my child wouldn't have got caught up in the sinful act. If you had been here, y'all hear what I'm saying? If I had been going to the right church and my child would never got caught up in fornication. If I had been talking to the right people, my child would have never got caught up in gays and lesbians. If I had been talking to the right people and saying the right things, these things never would have happened in my life. If I had been talking to the right people, my daddy would not have died. If I had been going to the right church, I wouldn't have lost a son. If I had been talking to the right people and going to the right church, I wouldn't have lost my job. If I was talking to the right people and going to the right church, I wouldn't be suffering in loss of my cars and my house. If I've been talking to the right people, I wouldn't have such a disease. If I've been talking to the right people, going to the right church, doing the right things. So I want you to understand something. You can do everything right, and it don't stop storms from coming. You can say everything right, and it don't stop you going through issues. You can say everything right, and you still gonna have some problems. You can do all of it and do it right, because you're not exempt from issues. They come to make you strong.